1, Travel and Things in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions presents In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batsoffen, and I'm very glad to introduce my guest today, who is the 2019 Mbokodo Women in Media Award winner. She's an award-winning author, broadcaster, and award-winning travel writer. She is none other than the inimitable, the iconic Kate Turkington. Kate, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. After an invitation like that, after an introduction like that, I can hardly wait to hear myself talk.
Kate, you just never seem to stop. Remember that movie, If This Is Tuesday, It Must Be Belgium?
Yes.
You're the living embodiment of that. Because I follow you on Facebook and various other platforms, and you just never here. You're like our ex-prime minister. You're a travel writer in absentia. You're always traveling.
Well, I work hard too.
Right.
As you know, I do a lot of media training. I have with Flow Communications, my daughter's company. We have fantastic clients, including all over Africa.
Right.
So that's one reason now post-COVID, I'm traveling in Africa again. But whenever I go to do work, I always organize that I have a few days before or a few days after that I can.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I've just come back from Kenya. I was working for 3 days in Nairobi, then went off to the Masai Mara for 3 nights, which was fantastic. But, tough, climbing on and off little airplanes, loading and unloading cases, going through customs, immigrations. But I'm very, very good at going into frail little old granny mode if I need to. So I don't suggest you all try to do this as a tip. But sometimes when I get to go through security, I have my bottle of water and I go into frail little old granny mode and I hold it up and I say, it's for my medication. I cannot tell you the times that I have got through, but perhaps I better not tell you which country it was. It was an African country.
You may never go back again.
True. Anyway, I arrived with a friend mid-afternoon. Small airport was deserted, and they needed fingerprints for the visa, because you get your visa when you get there. So I don't have fingerprints, and one of my daughters doesn't have fingerprints.
Okay.
So constant, we would have made a wonderful pair of cat burglars. Anyway, consternation. Oh, no fingerprints. How can we give you a visa? Nobody else, luckily, at the airport, just us. So consternation. Eventually, they call the airport manager, big, jolly local guy. And he says, no worry. He says, well, use mine. Look. He puts his fingerprints onto my visa. So in my passport, as we speak, I have a set of fingerprints belonging to I know not whom, only in Africa.
Kate, you can't write a script like that if you tried.
You can't. And you can't make it up.
No, if you put it into a travel show, people would not believe you.
No, anyway, so there, my passport is that visa. I mean, he could be a hardened criminal for all I know. No, he was very jolly. He was very, very jolly.
You mentioned COVID, and during COVID, when I started this In Conversation With, and we have spoken before on this platform, I used it in order to keep me sane, because I was a non-traveling travel writer, which sounds wonderful, but it's not. How did you deal with those rather strange 2020 and 2021 years that we all seem to forget about in our timelines?
I think, like everybody else, I just bit the bullet, mix a metaphor, knuckled down, and got on with it.
Yeah.
All my family got COVID at the end of last year. Not all. My youngest daughter and her family and I were away in the Midlands on a farm, and we all got, luckily, the Omicron version. We were all isolated anyway. We were on holiday, so it was the perfect time to get it. And we were all very lucky. We got, obviously, one of the mildest strains. It was just like having a kind of middling flu, not a bad flu, like a middling flu. But we kept going. There was nothing going on, as you know. And then towards the end of COVID, when we could get out again, I had to update a big international travel guide, Folders, and they asked me, first of all, to update the garden route. So I went down to the garden route for 10 days and went up and down. But David, oh my word, the number of small businesses that had gone under, the guest houses that had closed, the B&Bs that had closed, it was desperate. And as you know, I think a figure has been given. I don't know how true it is, but we lost in South Africa millions of visitors.
Oh, we did indeed. We did indeed. And they're still somewhat reticent to come back. They're starting to slowly.
Yes, they're coming back. On my last few travels, they're coming back. Cape Town's very busy again. They're definitely coming back because a lot of African countries have a US State Department travel advisory warning, including Kenya, let me tell you, because there's kidnappings, Al-Shabaab, robberies, hijackings, everything. And you know, when you travel, particularly in Africa, and I love traveling in Africa, but when you come back to South Africa, my word, you realize, in spite of all that's going on, how lucky we are.
We really are,
when you actually do. There's no other country in terms of even infrastructure, would you believe? There's no other country. Maybe Namibia. Namibia has superb infrastructure.
It's just a pity the R36 from Joburg to Hoedspruit isn't tarred properly, and there's still potholes that I've given names to now, because I know exactly where they are. I travel that route so regularly. And in fact, on the one journey, there was a biker couple stopped at the coffee shop where I was. And I walked over because I overheard them saying that they were heading off towards Hoedspruit. And I said, listen, at 17.7 Ks from where you're sitting is a huge pothole. Please be careful, because it goes across the entire road. And I was so dead keen to say, here's my phone number. Just tell me if my measurement was correct.
Except that's not the highway, though.
No. But if you can go on the highway, it's more expensive and it's slightly longer. But then you get caught at some of the passes. It's six of one and a half dozen of the other. If you've done it regularly, like I have, you know where to be cautious, and you just hope to get in a hole. Kate, I know that you're a birder of note, but I don't know if you, and this is a two-part question. I don't know if you have a birding life list. And by the same token, do you have a travel destination life list, so that if somebody was to do one of those programs, Kate Turkington, this is your life, they could go back to your diaries, to the beginnings of your travels, and go, this is where you travel, these are the dates you were away, that type of thing? Or don't you keep records like that?
Okay, two-part question. I'll answer it in two parts. Birding, as you still know, I'm still president of BirdLife Santon. It's my 15th year of being president. So I am a birder and I love birds. I haven't made a life list, and I only count I tick them off in my book, and one day when I've got time, I certainly have my original Newmans given to me by my late
Ken.
great friend Ken Newman.
Yeah.
I have a hell of a lot. I don't know. I don't count, like when I go to Kenya or Ghana or somewhere, I write down the birds, I make a note of them, but I don't add them to a life list. I only keep my South African birds. And secondly, I have absolutely no idea of how many countries I've been to.
You almost made me cough my tea all over my keyboard.
I never, ever have counted. It's a hell of a lot. It's like Shakespeare's Puck. I've girdled the world, but unlike Shakespeare's Puck, I think I've girdled it a few more times than Puck did. So no, I haven't. One day when I get time, I'll get that long list of countries and tick off stuff. There are 2 countries I haven't been to that I would like to. One is New Zealand, except it's so far away. So far away.
Yeah.
My mother lived there. My sister was headmistress of a girls' school there. My mother said after Ireland, it was the most beautiful country in the world.
It is indeed, Kate.
Interesting.
Yeah, I lived there for a while.
The other one is Canada. I'd love to do that Rocky Mountain train, but it is so expensive. Anywhere is so expensive.
Yeah, but that's specifically because my very best friend in the entire universe lives in Calgary, and he keeps saying there's Stampede in July. It's a huge road, and he keeps saying come. So I've done all the homework, but it is so expensive to get there. There are no cheap flights because you can't fly directly. I suppose if I went via Istanbul, through Dubai, back through Abu Dhabi, then London and Paris, and then perhaps to New York and then to Calgary, maybe. And by that time, your holiday's over, and I haven't seen Lawrence.
Whoever said, whatever old wise sage traveler said, it's better to journey than arrive, didn't know what he was talking about, did not know what he was talking about. Traveling, the actual act of traveling is pretty awful. I think you know what you're in for. You've got to gird your loins and just put up with it.
Unless, Kate, unless you're lucky, and when you get to the door of the aircraft, they point you to the left and not to the right.
It's happened to me a couple of times only.
Yeah.
Once, the only time, no, twice I've traveled first class. Once, many, many moons ago, I was traveling from Nigeria to the UK, and I had bought more liquor and cigarettes. My late husband was a smoker. I'd bought more cigarettes and liquor than I really should have over my allowance. Anyway, I did it. And I got bumped up to first class. And I was sitting next to this very large, wonderful African gentleman. We got chatting. And eventually I said to him, look, I'm a bit sort of overweight with my liquor and cigarettes. Would you mind carrying some in for me? He said, no, not at all. And he did so. Then he told me he was the Attorney General of Nigeria.
Because I was about...
You can't make these stories up. And once when I was going to Cuba, and I'm lucky enough to have been to Cuba twice, the food is probably the worst in the world, but the drinks are absolutely wonderful. Anyway, Tiffany and I, my daughter Tiffany and I mean, there's no queuing in Madrid if you're going to Cuba, which is where you fly from. Pushing, shoving, thronging the gates, almost like, go back to your word, it's stampede. So Tiffany and I are sort of in the midst of this pushing, shoving crowd. And this little man who looked exactly like Manuel from Faulty Towers appeared at our side, and he had a page torn out of an exercise book and something written on it in pencil. So he grabbed Tiffany and I by the sleeve, and by this stage we were so docile we would have gone anywhere. He grabbed us by the sleeve, led us off, and there we were in first class, Iberia Air Iberia. So, yeah, I have a niece who's a lawyer in Australia who is drop dead gorgeous and always dressed up to the nines. She claims if you travel dressed up to the nines and look good and
look
everything else, your chances of getting upgraded are higher. But I mean, the days...
No, you want to be comfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I remember the very first flight I did, which is probably almost before you were born, David. I had to travel first class. My husband was in the British Army and I was flying to Nigeria. I wore white gloves, a little hat, a frock with pleats, which was a mistake. I didn't know. I'd never been on a plane before. I was only 21 years old. And off I went, and we stopped in Tunis, Tripoli. We stopped in a town called Kano in northern Nigeria. And I kid you not, in those days, when a plane came in, the beautiful Hausa horsemen used to come out on their camels in their white turbans and their long white robes. They would ride out on their camels to the plane and blow silver trumpets. It ain't like that now.
No, I've never had silver trumpets blown. But talking about stampedes, I think it was Ghana. We were waiting to fly back to South Africa, and we were waiting and waiting and like you say, like in Madrid, there's no queuing. There's a throng of humanity waiting for the doors to open, and eventually the doors open, and a voice from the speakers goes, "Women and children first." And of course, the moment the doors are open, everybody pushes forward, and this poor voice starts screaming, "I said women and children first."
Like the Titanic. Exactly like the
Titanic. And we weren't hanging back because we wanted proper seats. You've mentioned Canada and New Zealand as want to go destinations. Are there destinations that you've been to that if somebody was to offer you first class accommodation, first class travel, you would go, "I've been there, I'm never going back, no matter where or how you send me there or what you pay me. I'm not going back ever"?
Yes, but it seems a bit unfair because there's riots and terrorism and everything there. But Burkina Faso in West Africa is, I can't think of I can think of a word to describe it, but I won't. It's the French.
I know what you say.
The French colonized it, and unlike some other colonizers who did leave hospitals and schools and systems in place, the French left nothing except a sense of style. So I had an outfit made, doll, in Burkina Faso, which I still have, which is absolutely gorgeous. And one thing I did do in Burkina Faso, which I've never done anywhere else, I sat on the back of a crocodile. Now, let me explain.
Why?
Good thinking, why? They have, I can't remember now if it was a sacred river or a sacred lake, and they have sacred crocodiles. These are huge creatures, and they drug them to oblivion. They throw them drugged rabbits or chickens or whatever. And there was this huge, about 3 meter long, I have a photograph, 3 meter long, very fat crocodile. And apparently the thing to do, if you're fearless, which I am, my late husband used to say, "You're not frightened of anything," which means you've got no imagination. Anyway, they said, "Come, sit on the back of the sacred crocodile." So I did. It was huge. It was quite comfortable, actually. It moved a bit.
Was it wearing crocodile shoes?
No, it even had a name, I forget, but the locals were very in awe that I had sat on its back and gave me some fancy name or other. So somewhere in the universe, in cyberspace, I'm the queen of crocodiles. So
and I wonder what the crocodile's take on the story is. I wonder how he told his mates. I had this woman, she just arrived, sat on my back. I have no idea why. Everybody clapped for her. She left. I'm still here, type of thing.
Well, it probably went back to its family that night and said, you're not going to believe what happened to me today.
It's like those hyena guys in Ethiopia that feed the hyenas. Yeah.
I didn't I didn't feed them, but I've been in Hadar where the hyenas, and I was once in Sabi Sand somewhere. No, I can't remember where, maybe Mala Mala, I can't remember. And Kim Wallater, the famous wildlife photographer and filmmaker, was there. And we just happened along, and there he was, and he'd been working with this, what's the collective noun for hyenas? Clan. He'd been working with this clan of hyenas for a couple of years, and he was just about to interact with them. So he sat there, he climbed out of his vehicle, he sat on the ground. The hyenas came and licked his feet. I've never forgotten, they were very dusty feet.
Right.
They licked his feet and interacted with him, and then he climbed back in his vehicle, and that was another, the hyena. A female going back to the pups in the den saying, your mother had a very funny experience today. Somebody sucked her toes.
But now also, I seem to remember from when you and I were still working together at one particular stage, you went off to Namibia, and you were in your 8th decade, if I remember correctly, and you came off a quad bike in the middle of the desert. And you still, with broken ribs, you still drove back.
Still, it was only 5 years ago. It had rained in the Namib. I have photographs of oryx gambling in the rain, not gambling as in gambling, but gambling, frolicking in the rain. And my daughter Tara and I and the guide, we were staying at a camp in the middle of Sossusvlei. We went out on quad bikes. The guide was quite inexperienced, I must tell you. And I was zipping along. It was wonderful at like 40 k's an hour, which you don't do on a quad bike.
No,
and I think I hit the only stone in that part of the sandy Namib desert, came flying off. The bike fell on top of me. Tara rushed out. I couldn't speak because I was winded. Tara thought I was dead, managed like Superman to lift the bike off me, and I cracked 5 ribs. And the worst thing was, seriously, we were in the middle of the desert. I had to ride that quad bike back to camp. And I think because of my advanced years, the ribs never healed properly. And to this day, if I lift something heavy or I'm hanging my washing out a heavy wet towel, I feel it. So I don't do quad bikes anymore.
Kate,
but I was in Namibia in March and had the most fantastic trip. Went up to Makuti, Etosha Lodge on the edge of Etosha. Then we flew back. I was in a very small press group, again with my daughter Tara. Then we went down to Swakopmund, and I love Swakopmund. And I always write when I'm writing about it. It's like a giant pair of hands took this little Bavarian town and placed it on the edge of the Atlantic between the desert. The desert, there's nothing but desert.
Yeah.
Swakopmund and the wild Atlantic. And I mean, there are fat German ladies walking, fat German sausage dogs along the promenade. People still speak German in the shops. It's an incredible little town and seems I suppose it's because there are so few people. I mean, there's only 1.5 people per square kilometre in Namibia. But the Namibian government, and you know, Namibia has the freest press in Africa. They're top of the free press list. We're only 4th. Anyway, whether in spite of their dreadful colonial past, Namibia had one of the worst pasts ever. They've come right. And like in Swakopmund, they have put money into helping Namibians. So at Swakopmund, just outside, there is, I hesitate to use the word township, but I can't think of another word. But there's another town which has electricity. The people have houses. They have running water. There are schools. They've spent, the Namibian government have spent their money very wisely. But I've been horrified to hear, and you probably heard it too, they found gas off the coast. So what this will do to the economy, to the politics, to the people. My advice will be to people, get to Namibia while you can. Because, and then we went up to Chobe Water Villas, which has just won some mega global award. And from the outside, it's just the thatched chalets on the edge of the Zambezi, no, the Chobe River. But when you go inside, it's, I hate to say designer chic, because I hate designer chic in the bush, but it is the most beautiful, there are the most beautiful, beautiful interiors of
Kate,
chandeliers.
I'm going to have to stop you there because we're about to run out of time on Zoom. It's always wonderful to chat to you. Long may you travel, really and truly.
Thank you.
And long may you keep bringing us your stories. My guest today on In Conversation with the inimitable, the wonderful, and my writing mentor, Kate Turkington. Kate, once again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, and everybody have a good day.